All right, hey, we are in week 2 of our series, Counterfeit God, and here is the general idea behind the series, is that there are some hidden motivators that you have in your life that are ultimately behind the worst decisions that you have ever made, right? And the thing is, in the Bible, we're often warned against idolatry. But idolatry sounds like something that happened a long time ago, or maybe happens in other parts of the world, but it's clearly not something that we struggle with. At least that's the thought. But my submission is that idolatry is something that we struggle with. That we might not worship Baal or Ashereth or Ra, but we worship other gods like approval or comfort, control, power. And the truth is, those are actually the same gods that the ancient peoples worshipped as well. They just expressed it differently than we do. And so if you are somebody that's like wondering like, okay, so man, you say that I have a problem with idolatry. Well, I don't think I do. If you want to find out what that God is that you worship, here's one way that you can do it. You can We hate that, don't we? We hate awkward silence. We're just always waiting for something to happen in those moments. But the truth is, like, whenever there is silence, whenever there is a time of prolonged waiting, a lot of things start to bubble up. Do you guys want to learn a trade secret, something that we kind of keep on the down low around here that I can let you know today? So for those of you who have been in one of our groups, okay, like you've been in one of our small groups that we have, here's something that we teach all of our group leaders to do. One of the worst things a group leader can do is when they ask a question and they answer it themselves, okay? So here's something that we teach our group leaders to do. Ask the question and then say nothing. Just smile and make eye contact with every single person in the room. And eventually, somebody will crack. Is what they're saying something they believe? I don't know. Is it coherent? Not always. Did they just repeat the question? Almost definitely. But somebody will eventually say something and it will break the silence and suddenly everybody else will start to speak. And why does that work? Because we hate silence. We hate waiting. This has got to be a universal experience. I'm sure that you've gone through the exact same emotions I have. Have you ever applied for something like whether it's a job, an apartment, getting into grad school, and they tell you, we will let you know via email, and you check your email every spare moment that you have, right? Like you're just constantly like, oh, I wonder if they've responded yet. And you just go back to it over and over and over. Why do you do that? Because you hate waiting. You don't want to sit in that silence, in that moment of like, I just don't know what's going to happen. I've never been tortured, but I can't imagine it's much worse than when you go into a waiting room and you wait. It just feels like it's never going to end. And then you see the person you're waiting on walk into that waiting room and then immediately walk out to the front door, either to lunch or to leave. I don't know where they're going. And if you've been like me in those moments, there's a panic that starts to well up, right? You're like, where are you going? What are you doing? I need you to like take care of this right now. And why is that? Because we hate it. We hate silence. We hate waiting. And the thing is, this happens spiritually too. Like a loved one will get sick, or the economy will shift. Your economy will shift. Somebody will betray you. Like there'll be some inciting incident that just was not what you had planned. And what do? You turn to God. You start to pray about this. It even looks sometimes like something's materializing. God's about to do something, but then nothing. And so you keep praying and you keep going back to God. You share it with other people and you try and like get God to move in some way and admit it, because you've probably had the same thought I have. In those moments you think, well, if God's not going to do something, I will. And you start to plan, you start to move, you start to scheme. And the reason why is because we hate waiting, and we hate waiting even more when we feel like we are in the dark. And what happens is our plans, the things that we come up with, it feels comforting to us. When we come up with like an idea of like, all right, I know how I'm going to fix this. I know how like I'll solve this problem. It brings like a level of just comfort to us. And so what we do is we plan, we scheme, we move, we get it all in place, And then when those plans are thwarted, we start to panic. But we don't just sit there. We don't just say, well, I tried it and it was wrong. We try the whole process over again. We build things to make us feel better. We do all this stuff because we are just convinced, I can organize this. I can plan my way out of this. I can power my way through this. I can be in charge of all of this. But what we see is that when it comes to idolatry and this connection to waiting in silence, is that often it's more revealing about what we actually bow to than it actually solves the issue at hand. And so today we're going to look at one of the most famous stories in all the Bible when it comes to idolatry. And we're going to see that it was not birthed out of a desire to be evil. It was out of a desire to regain control in what felt like an uncontrollable situation. So if you want to turn your Bible, we're going to be in Exodus chapter 32. It's the second book of the Bible, the 32nd chapter. We're going to jump into that, but before we do, I need to give you a little bit of just context of what's going on here. Like if you were here last Sunday, you are primed for today because this is very much like a sequel to a lot of the things that we talked about last week. See, last week we were in Exodus 7 through 12, which was the story of God raining plagues down upon the Egyptians. See, the Israelites, they had been in bondage for 400 years. And so God systematically starts to destroy all of their false gods through a series of plagues, including the Passover, where God comes down and he kills the firstborn of every household that does not have the blood of the Passover lamb painted on its doorposts. And so what he's doing is he is breaking down the worship that the Egyptians had, as well as even the Israelites. And what we see now in Exodus chapter 32 is those same people who had been in bondage to the Egyptians, they're now out of that bondage, they're now out of slavery, they're in the wilderness. And what happens is God, he parts the Red Sea, they pass through, he gives them the 10 Commandments, and after all of this, the Israelites basically say, we've experienced enough supernatural for our lifetimes. Moses, we need you to handle all of this from now on. We don't want to hear God. We don't want to be part of it. It's too scary for us. So Moses moves from just being the leader of the Israelites to the guy who is now the mediator between God and the people. And so they're at this point in an area called Sinai, and there's a giant mountain there, and God has now descended to the very top of that mountain. Now, you might have this image of a physical being coming down, like resting at the top of the mountain, kind of like maybe Greek mythology where, Mount Olympus. That's not what happens. God comes down as a cloud. And in fact, it's not just described as a cloud, it's described as an all-consuming fire. And so Moses, he goes to his brother Aaron, who is, the high priest as well as one of the co-spokesmen to Pharaoh during all the plagues, and he tells him, you're in charge, I'm going to walk up on top of that mountain. So for the Israelites, here's what they see. They see Moses, their 80-year-old leader, walk up this mountain into the scary God cloud, and he does not come back down. He's there for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And by the way, they're not getting any updates as to what's happening. Okay? 5 weeks, 5.5 weeks. He's walked up. He's not coming back. For 40 days, they're just left down at the bottom of the mountain wondering what is going to happen next. I mean, in their world, it's like dad left for cigarettes and he's not coming back. Like that's the feeling that they've got. And so this is what it says in Exodus 32, starting verse 1. It says, when the people saw how long it was taking Moses to come back down the mountain, they gathered around Aaron. Come on, they said, make us some gods who can lead us. We don't know what happened to this fellow Moses who brought us here from the land of Egypt. Because when we read this, here's what this comes across as to us. One sentence ago, Moses was part of the conversation, and then one sentence later, he's gone. So for us, it's like a matter of seconds. And in some ways, it gives us this image that all of the Israelites who are at the bottom of the mountain, they're like the high school kid who's watching out the window to see when mom and dad turn the corner, to then hey, bring the keg over, let's get this party started. But that's not what's happening. In fact, in the Hebrew, what this actually is implying is there is a great fear of abandonment. They think Moses is gone. He is not coming back. And frankly, like, from their perspective, 80-year-old leader has walked up a mountain into a scary cloud. Like, what are you going to think is happening? They haven't heard anything. And so their whole response is, we need a God who can lead us. Not because they're waiting for the opportunity to worship somebody else. It's because their leader is gone and they are a little scared. So it keeps going. It says, so Aaron said, take the gold rings from your ears, or from the ears of your wives and sons and daughters, and bring them to me. So the people took the gold rings from their ears, and they brought them to Aaron. Then Aaron took the gold, melted it down, and molded it into the shape of a calf. When the people saw it, they exclaimed, "O Israel, these are the gods who brought you out of the land of Egypt." Okay, it is kind of weird, isn't it? Like, you've got Aaron, who's supposed to be the high priest, and immediately, as soon as people are like, make us a God who can lead us, he's like, okay, and he just seems to do it. And I think this is actually kind of revealing as to who Aaron is, that he was somebody that more than likely was just a little scared of the crowd. You've got this big mob of people who are demanding something. And rather than pushing back, rather than saying, no, my hope is in God, he's like, okay, fine, let's do it. And so, of course, he goes in and it says he shapes it into what looks like a calf, like a little cow. And there's a lot of thoughts as to why he did this. There's one theory, I think it's actually probably the most likely, and that is if you were to go, 3,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago to the city of Memphis inside of Egypt, which was not too far away from Goshen where all the Israelites lived, they worshiped a god named Apis. And Apis was supposed to be the herald for the creator god of Ptah. Now, you're like, okay, so what is the connection here? Well, here's what happens is whenever they would designate the Apis, they actually would have a literal cow. Like a cow would be born, and they would say, this is Apis, the cow god, and they would wait for it to live its whole life, and when it would die, they would count 40 days, and then they would designate the next calf as the leader. Okay, so you can already see there's a lot of parallels here to this. Now, the other thought is it could also be that there was a god of the region of Sinai called Hathor. And Hathor was a cow god of provision, protection, sensuality, and music. File those in the back of your mind because it's likely that maybe this influenced it as well. But my point being is whenever their backs were up against the wall, their response was to ask potentially these two questions. What have we seen done in the past? Maybe what have we experienced in the past? Or as we look around, what are other people doing for help? Right? Like they're kind of looking back at just like from what we've experienced, what are some things that might solve this problem? And it's also pretty interesting. They have been released from slavery. They don't need to be committed to anything Egyptian in their life any longer. But even though they are objectively freed from their slavery, their hearts are still enslaved. They're still captured. And I actually think this is a way that compromise creeps into our life. See, I don't think that most of you walk into a situation asking, man, what else am I going to worship? But here's what happens is, Tim Keller, he's an author and pastor. He was a pastor in New York for a long time. He wrote a book about this, and he talks about how there is a difference between surface idols and deep idols. See, a surface idol is the actual physical thing that we just draw our attention to. Like in this case, it is the golden calf. Or maybe in your life, it is an inflated bank account, or it could be maybe a meticulously planned career. But the deep idol is the hidden motivator for that thing, right? Like for the Israelites, I don't believe that they said, man, we just really love cows. Like, let's build a gold one. It was because there's uncertainty right now. We don't know who's going to lead us. If Moses is gone, who is going to speak on behalf of the gods to us? And in that moment, they said, what have we seen happen in the past? What has worked for others around us? And they said, let's adopt that. And see, whenever that deep idol And especially like the deep idol of control is threatened. You might start to feel impatient. You might start to feel threatened. You might start to feel stuck. And in those moments, if you worship something else, you're going to panic. And the way that your panic comes out, it might be that you're somebody who lashes out in fear. You might be the type of person who gets depressed. You might be the person who explodes in anger. But my point is, when you feel like you're stuck in one of those holding patterns, you're liable to feel like, I got to do something just to get control back. And you will do that thing. You're like, I would never do that. And frankly, back to the story, like here's one of the most insidious parts of the whole affair. It says in verse 5, Aaron saw how excited the people were, right? Like at first, he's feeling the pressure of, like, they're going to kill me if I don't do this. But then he's like, oh, they actually really like this. He saw how excited the people were, so he built an altar in front of the calf. And then he announced, tomorrow is going to be a festival to the Lord. Just, what's not actually implied here is that the calf is now like the embodiment of the Lord. What he's doing is he's saying, hey, we're going to worship this, but we're also worshiping God. We're going to do both. Even though 12 chapters earlier, God just told them, you're not to worship any other gods but me. They're like, hey, not only are we going to worship another God, we're going to slap like the endorsed by God sticker on the whole thing, right? Like, now this is kind of a repeat from the series that we did a month ago through the book of Colossians called Overcomplicated, but this was the Old Testament version of the Jesus plus heresy. It's, in some ways, like we see this play out in our world today, where people say, yeah, I'm led by God, but I'm also led by the stars, and like, Mars is in retrograde right now, so like I just think that like, it's Jesus plus astrology, or other people might say it's Jesus plus money, or it's Jesus plus, sex, I don't know, whatever it is. But the word for this is syncretism. It's I'm going to mix the holy with the unholy, and this plays out a couple different ways. See, for some of you, your temptation is to say, I need something else to help me get to God. And you will try and mix the holy with the unholy in a way that feels so righteous, where you'll say, I just need to try a little bit harder. I need to follow these rules, and if I can do these good deeds, God will love me a little bit more, and he will accept me. That's where some of you land. But others of you, that's not really your temptation. Your temptation is to take something that might not be good and say, I think God might be behind this. I think that he might be endorsing this. I think that God might be saying like, hey, this is a good thing, where it plays out like this. God's loving. I know that God has forgiven me. So I think that I should be able to, just do whatever the heck I want in my life. Or like, I think that God really wants me to be rich. And so you'll lay down your life, you'll sacrifice your family, you'll do whatever it takes to get whatever that is. And the truth is, like, you're mixing the holy with the unholy by saying, I think God might be behind this. See, in Exodus chapter 32, we see a pattern that we're likely to repeat. Whenever God delays something in our life, we can feel like we're out of control. And so we will manufacture our own version of the golden calves. It might be like, I don't know if God's really going to take care of me, and so I need to save up as much money as I can because I don't really think God's going to be there, so I need to be there for myself. And so you'll sacrifice, you'll cheat other people, you'll just sell everything that you've got to try and feel a little bit protected by your money. Or maybe you'll be the type of person that, man, I don't really feel like God's going to make me feel comfortable and confident in my identity, so I am going to do whatever I can to be a success. If that means I need to bully my coworkers, if that means that I need to lie to the client, if that means that I need to just push my family aside, I will do that if that will result in me feeling like I'm something or somebody. And what we do is we find ourselves just bowing to the feet of these gods that, frankly, will never actually give us what we think they will. And then what we'll do is we'll slap that God and wisdom sticker right on it. But we're not actually practicing faith. We're practicing idolatry, practiced as anxiety management. Okay, so back to the story. Well, kind of. Like, have you guys read Where the Wild Things Are recently? If you don't live in my home, you probably haven't. But let me just remind you of the book. So you've got little Max who dresses up in the wolf costume, and he goes and terrorizes the whole house. Which, if I remember right, like he chases his dog with a fork. I mean, what kind of like sick like family is this? And apparently, he does something so egregious that Mom says, "You're going to bed without supper." So he walks up there in a huff, and he gets into his room, and immediately the walls start to blend away. And he's like in this forest, and he walks along, and he gets to the beach. And he gets in the boat, and he sails to the island where the wild things are. And when he gets there, their form of government is basically like a blink test because he just makes eye contact, and they're like, "Oh, you're our king." And his very first thing that he says to him is, "Now as your king, let the wild rumpus start." Now, as a child, my parents would read me this book, and whenever we get to that page, my dad would announce loudly, "Let the wild rumpus begin." And for like 2 to 3 minutes, I would freak the geek out around the house. I just run around like crazy. It was super fun. So if you have that image in your mind, just like make it PG-13, and you'll get an idea of what happens next in the story. That it actually says that what happens is pagan revelry is happening down at the bottom of the mountain. And so while all that revelry is happening down there, Moses is up on the mountain with God. And God tells him, and there's some fun things here with the pronouns, because up until this point, it had always been my people, my people. In this moment, God says, "Moses, you better get down there. Your people are like, they're messing up big time. They're breaking my commandments. They're worshiping idols. Like, they are rumpusing just a little too hard, okay? You got to get down there." So then God says to him in verse 10, "Now leave me alone so my fierce anger can blaze against them, and I will destroy them. Then I will make you, Moses, into a great nation." Okay, we got to unpack this. Because on the surface, this sounds very strange. We like to emphasize, rightfully so, how loving and patient God is. And in this moment, here's what we see him saying is, "Hey, I need you to get out of my way because I am going to wipe these people out." Moms and dads, we've been there, right? You know, like, my dad used to say this all the time, "Matt, I brought you into this world, I can take you out of it," right? Like, there's a little bit of that tone that's happening here. And if you just read this at face value, you're like, who is this God? This seems maniacal. This seems awful. Here's the best way to understand this. If God really wanted to wipe these people out, he's not asking Moses for permission. He's just going to do it, okay? What's happening is God does not waste an opportunity. And so he's like, "Hey, this is a good time to just test Moses and kind of see where is he at in this whole process." And in part, it's testing Moses specifically because when he says, "I will make you into a great nation," here is the proposition that he is testing Moses with. "Moses, do you want to be Abraham?" For those who are newer to church and faith, like, Abraham was the ancestor to all of these Israelites who are now worshiping these false gods. That Abraham shows up in the book of Genesis, and God makes a promise to him that you're going to be the father of a great nation. And if you remember, Abraham's biggest problem, he didn't have enough kids to have a great nation under him. And meanwhile, you've got Moses, and he's looking around saying, "I got too many kids. I'm the only grown-up in this entire camp." And the temptation that he was giving to Moses was, do you want a clean slate? Do you want to get rid of all of the headaches, all of the problems that you're dealing with? Because, I could make you into the great nation. I could make you into the father of the faith. We could just start over. And you might be like, "Well, why is he doing this?" Well, if you read the story of Moses' life, you'll notice that there's a couple times where Moses starts to exhibit some patterns of, "Hey, I think I'm something. I think I'm somebody." He grew up in Pharaoh's home. When he got to a certain age, he said, I am going to free my ethnic people. And so he goes and he gets into a fight with one of the Egyptians. He kills him and has to hide the body. Like, there's some patterns here where more than likely he struggled not not with like insecurity, maybe like his brother Aaron did, but struggle a little with some pride of like, I want to be somebody that maybe I'm not. And so God's asked him like, hey, how much do you still want that? God was checking, like, is this still a temptation in your life? Was he going to take a shortcut to personal glory, or would he stand in the gap for these people? You know, for Moses, this was not the way that he thought his day was going to go. Like, from his perspective, God's like threatening to nuke all the people. And so Moses, he reasons with God, and he actually gives him a few reasons why God shouldn't. He's like, God, these are your people. They're not just mine. They're your people. And then he also poses this. What are the Egyptians going to think? You just put on this incredible display of your power. If you did all that just to lead your people out here to kill them, like what does that say about your character and who you are? And then he reminds them as well. He's like, remember your promises that you made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Do you remember what you promised them? And so God hears this, of course, and he was never really going to destroy the people. It was not wasting an opportunity with Moses, and responds with compassion to him. God is not fickle. He is not hot-headed. He doesn't just like radically change his mind. He doesn't waste the opportunity. And he knows that Moses is going to come out of this with a much higher confidence and faith in God. But Moses also knows, like, this whole situation that we've just experienced, it's not over yet. So the next day, he actually goes back up on the mountain to talk to God because he's like, we got to fix this mess. And so it actually says in verse 31, so Moses returned to the Lord, and he said, oh, what a terrible sin these people have committed. They have made gods of gold for themselves. But now, if you will only forgive their sin, but if not, erase my name from the record that you have written. Here's what he's just offered. God, I know that you're holy, and I also know that you're just. And as you've been downloading all of these laws to me over the last several chapters of Exodus, if I'm understanding your character and your nature all the more, I know that what they just did, it requires sacrifice. Like, the debt has to be paid. Like, he knows that his brother Aaron, the high priest, the fellow spokesman, like, he's the one kind of leading the charge in some ways. Like, Moses knows something is fundamentally different now. He's like, I know this is going to require a sacrifice. And his conclusion is, if somebody needs to die for this, please don't let it be my people. Please take me. And the contrast is actually pretty striking here because God had been offering Moses the opportunity to become the new Abraham. And instead, Moses is now saying, will you take me instead? And God says, no. But centuries later, Jesus would actually make the same exact offer, and the Father would say, yes. And the reason why is because Jesus is actually the true and better mediator between God and man. See, Moses comes down from the mountain. He sees the pagan revelry that's happening at the base of Mount Sinai. And of course, it's bad, but the truth is he is also guilty in some ways. Like, he has his own gods that he turns to in worship. And so God, like, he's saying, well, Moses, you're just as guilty. But Jesus comes down from heaven, and he enters into the world that we exist in. He makes himself poor on our behalf. And he says, I will pay for the sins of these people. Jesus is the true and better mediator. And here's something that's even more fantastic. You know, as Jesus went to the cross, he guaranteed our forgiveness, which is an incredible thing. Mercy is awesome. But if it had just been the cross, God could have said, hey, the debt has been paid. You don't have to pay it, but we're done here. But because of his resurrection, the fact that he comes back from the dead, he's now guaranteeing that those deep idols, those desires for power, control, certainty, security in your life, like, he's guaranteeing, like, not only can I forgive you, I can actually satisfy those deep desires of your heart as well. That I can give you what's called grace. And I can give you gifts, things that you do not deserve. Like, Jesus is so much better than even what we read about in the Old Testament with God saying, I will let my wrath pass over these people, and I will pay for it a different way. And the reason why and the way he pays for it is through his own son. See, because of Jesus, because he can grant us the innermost desires of our heart, like we don't need a grip for the reins of control in our life. I can follow God who can like protect me and order my steps. Because of Jesus, I don't have to assert power over others, even when there's that part of me that really wants to. Because I follow a God who can free me from trying to play a God in other people's lives. Because of Jesus, I don't need the appreciation of other people. Like, I don't need the applause of the crowd. And the reason why is because we have a God who loves us unconditionally and can secure our identity. And because of Jesus, we are freed from the desire to, like, be master of the universe. See, the Hebrews in the wilderness, they had fallen in worship to this golden calf. But really, their God was something deeper. See, it was when they thought that God had gone silent. Moses had disappeared, that he has left the reservation. Their assumption was, dude is gone, we are on our own. And in the silence and in the waiting, they begin to panic. And in their panic, they turn to something that really should have repulsed them. But instead, they labeled it as something holy and righteous, and they synced it with God. We will also worship at the feet of the gods of security and control. And if you want to know if that's you, just ask yourself this question. When do I feel the most anxious? Then you have to chase that question, chase that feeling, until you can pinpoint what is the thing that you turn to try and drive the anxiety away. And if you're turning to anything other than God, chances are you are worshiping at the feet of another God, maybe unknowingly. See, the Israelites, they had a golden calf because that was their attempt at regaining control. That's what they were trying to do. They're like, we can stop this anxiety by doing this. But maybe for you, it's hoarding resources. Maybe it's you're convinced that like a big bank account will give you peace. Maybe you're overworking or you're micromanaging others. And to be clear, it's not because those things work. It's the closest thing that you can come up with for a solution. And the problem with a counterfeit God is no matter how much you sacrifice, no matter how much you give, how much you just want to like lay down everything for it, you're always going to be left feeling like you have to do just a little bit more. For the Israelites, they're trying to solve this feeling of abandonment. For Aaron, it was, I need to feel accepted. And God tests Moses to see, like, is he going to get enough significance from what God's going to do, or is he going to need to be the hero of his own story? But my question is, what is it for you? What God has a grip on your heart? Here's the secret that most people don't know. We assume, hey, the way I'm going to drive out those counterfeit gods is I'm going to try harder. And so, like, if you're a control freak, you'll think, you know what I'll do? I will try harder not to be a control freak. How's that going for you, right? Like, you can't will your way out of this. The way that you drive out worship to other gods is through faith. See, faith, it shows the reality of what we hope for. It's the evidence of things we cannot see. See, part of what makes removing our idols so hard is that we actually have to trust that Jesus is better. And that's something that's really easy to say in church, but it's very hard to live out on a Tuesday. Because if you're scared that God actually won't provide for you, and on Tuesday, you get that flat tire and you take it into the tire shop and they're like, well, it's going to be $1,000. And you're like, that's going to drain my emergency fund? Or I'm going to have to put this all on a credit card? Like, your thought is like, God's not providing for me. So yeah, it's really easy in this moment to say, just trust Jesus. But it's a lot harder in those moments, which is why it's so important that we actually turn to him in worship. In fact, one of the reasons why one of our core values as a church is audacious faith is because of this very thing. In fact, we say it this way. It says, we trust God no matter what. So we go all in, moved by faith, not paralyzed by fear. 2 Corinthians 5:7 would say, we walk by faith, not by sight. In your world, by sight is anything that your logic has told you is right. By sight is what works for other people. Sight is like what's worked for me in the past. And what we're challenged to do is we don't walk based on like what I can reason, what I can logic my way out of. I walk by faith, trusting that God is who he says he is. And the question that you can ask yourself is, am I following my assessment or am I following God's direction? Just so you know, God's direction in your life, it will never contradict his word. It will never contradict what he has laid out for us in the scriptures. Anything other than that is a push away from God's leading and into the leading of a false God. And here's something else I've learned, is that really the way to grow in faith is to spend more time with a faithful God. Is that if you make that prayer of, God, I want to trust you more, I want to have more faith, you'll start to notice he gives you these small little, almost micro-training opportunities where it's like, all right, maybe nobody else will know right now, but God, I'm going to trust you in this. And what he does is he proves himself true and right in that little thing, and then something bigger comes around. You're like, all right, God, I trusted you last time, I'll trust you this time. And you trust him in that moment. And those faith muscles get just a little bit stronger until eventually you become the type of person that you are unshakable. Think about the most faithful people you know in your life, and the chances are there were lots of opportunities to prove that faith before they became the person that you knew. That grandma that you're like, man, she just like believes God for everything. Chances are there was a lot of moments in her life where she said, I trust God no matter what. I am moved by God. I'm not moved by my own like assessment of what's going on. And so some of you are scared, like, well, yeah, I say I'm going to trust God. Tomorrow he's going to like take away my house. He's going to like fire me from my job. Like he's going to do the biggest thing possible. And you know what? He could. He's God. He can do whatever the heck he wants. But chances are he's going to do something small. And it's going to be your opportunity to say, do I trust him or do I not? And so I want you to, right now, just to question, where does the chief focus of my heart land? See, my hope is that all of us, the chief focus of our heart lands on Christ. And there's this misconception that slips into religious circles like this where, you think, well, yeah, Jesus is what you need at the beginning of your relationship, but then it kind of rests on you, right? Like you got to try harder, you got to be better, like you got to do these things in order for God to accept you and like you. But the truth is, it doesn't matter if you are new to faith or if you are a seasoned Christian veteran, right? Like you need Jesus every step of the way. It's by grace and grace alone. That is the gospel. You don't have to work. He does the work for you. And it is like a loving father that I just trust that he's not going to lead me astray, so I just follow his steps. It all starts with Jesus. And so I want to pray for us right now. I want to pray that God will refocus our hearts, that God will give us exactly where we need to put our time, our attention, our treasure, whatever it is, that God will make it so abundantly clear. So if you would, just bow your head and close your eyes and let's pray to God. God, I'm praying right now for the people in this room whose hearts have been chasing the wrong things, that whether it is through their work, whether it's through their family, whether it's through whatever good thing that they've elevated to an ultimate thing it might be, or whether it is an evil thing. I don't know, God, but whatever those things are that we turn to try and push the anxiety out of our life, the God, that you would expose just the false nature of those promises. The God, that we would trust you instead. The God, that we would put our time and our focus on you instead. God, I pray that tomorrow you would give us the opportunity to trust you above all else. And the God, that you would prove yourself true in that moment. That as we take that step towards you, that the worst case scenario that we think that trusting you is going to lead to, ruin, heartbreak, financial ruin, whatever that thing might be. God, I pray that you would prove that that's not always the case. That you can provide, that you can step into the gap, that the God, that we don't have to worry about tomorrow because you've taken care of our today and our tomorrow. God, I pray for those who feel like you are just being too silent. The God, in that silence, in that waiting, they would not lose their faith, but God, it would be strengthened. The God, that you would prove that you're doing something incredible and amazing up on top of the mountain, and that it's just a matter of time before you reveal what that is. God, I pray for those in this room who are like at the goal line of faith right now, that they're like they're just at that moment where like, man, am I going to believe or am I not going to believe? That God, that you would push them across that goal line, that they would say, you know what, today is the day that I'm going to stop trusting myself, but I'm going to trust in you. And the God, that you would give them this prayer. Lord, I need you to forgive me my sins. I need you to take full control of my life. Thank you for your mercy. Thank you for your grace. My life is yours. And so, Lord, I pray this in your Son Jesus' name, who makes everything possible, who is so much greater and grander than we could ever ask, think, or imagine. I pray this in his name. Amen.